Okay, so in this tutorial, we're going to learn about manipulating lists, creating new lists, and also accessing what I call a 2D list. Okay, so you should have been given a link to this card deck template, and you should see the word fork at the top. Basically, what a fork is a code project that's been developed. You can fork it, you can create another branch of the project, and then that is your own separate one. And so the idea is that you can fork out into lots of different directions with different people making their own versions. It's a bit of a terminology coming from something called Git, which is a development of projects based on sort of like little branches or forks, as they say. So what you do first is you click the word fork, and you then have your own version of it. So that's like branched off from the one I made. That's your own sort of editable version. I'm also going to change the name of it to Blackjack. Okay, and that should be changed. Oh no, I've already got the name Blackjack somewhere else. Okay, Blackjack one. Okay, so what I've given you is a deck of cards as a what we call a two-dimensional list. So before we sort of move on to that, I'm going to just scroll down the page a little bit. I'm going to add some new lines of code in that I'm going to delete later. It's just a practice code, and I want you to try this with me. So before we understand what a two-dimensional list is, and it's quite simple as a concept, we need to understand what a normal list is or a one-dimensional list. So I'm going to just create a random list of items. I'm going to call it listy, and I'm going to create it with square brackets. So at this point, if you're like, well, what is a list? A list is a bit like a variable, except its data is chunked into little pieces, and each piece can be called via a number, like a 0 to whatever length the list is number. And each item has one of these numbers, and we call it the index within the list. So a list has an index of numbers. Each number corresponds to a particular chunk of data. They're like little mini variables almost. So that's how a list works. Instead of a single item of data, which is a variable, it's lots of chunks of data, each with a number that calls it. And I'll show you how this works now. So I'm going to go down the road of using friends. So Ross, Phoebe, Rachel, and we're just going to go for a few of them. Right, leave out Chandler and Monica. Alright, so that's the first thing. And then I'm going to print an item in the list. So what I do is I print listy and then some square brackets, because the list has square brackets to define what it is. We know with square brackets that that is a list. I'm going to print item 0, and if I run that now, I've got Ross. Alright, I could even type in print listy item 0 is, just to make it really nice and exciting, listy item 0 is Ross, item 1 is Phoebe, and etc, etc. So 2 will be Rachel and 3 will be Joey. I know it's got 4 items, but the reason for that is computers store memory in numbered locations, and computers treat the number 0 as an actual real number. It's an item of storage, it really exists. So when you have a 0, for example, stored as a binary number, you can have 8 zeros, a byte of bits, 8 individual ones and zeros. If there's 8 zeros, it's still an actual physical number that has to be stored by the computer. So in that respect, computers always start a list with item 0. They call this 0 as opposed to item 1. As long as you can stick with that rule, you won't get confused. Okay, so that's how we manipulate lists. And we could print all of them using loops, which I'll show you to do later on. That will be something we build to. But for now, I just want to get you comfortable with the idea of printing different items in the list. So it's really in your advantage if you start to print off different list items. And we can go for list item 2. And obviously we get Rachel. Okay, now that's the first video I'm going to do on lists. I'm going to break that there. Obviously, you can answer some questions, and then we're going to come back to looking at the idea of two-dimensional lists.